stand on the principle that, the founding principle of freedom, limited government, and that those two combined lead to unlimited opportunity. And I think that everyone in this room probably stands on the same principle. I want to know, as president, when you start looking at cutting us from a $14.5 trillion deficit down to an actually balanced budget, what principle do you stand on when you start looking at the financial side of the job?
One of the things I talked about at the debate the other night, you have to look at what the role of the federal government is in our society. And we have, over time, and Republicans are as guilty as this as Democrats, just over time, just increased the role of government. I got to tell you, as a United States Senator, for every one person that came in to meet with me from my home state and talk to me about limited government and the government doing something that they shouldn't be doing, I had 100 people come in and ask me for the government to do more. At least, and probably 100 to 1 is not even close. It's probably more like 500 to 1. And I don't know, maybe New Hampshire's different. You know, maybe the guys that I served with in New Hampshire didn't have that, but I can tell you that there's an enormous amount of pressure put on members of Congress and the federal government. I had people coming in and asking me to pass federal laws to stop dogs from barking at their next door neighbor. I mean, this is how bizarre it would get. And they were serious about it. So the idea that in the American psyche, we have gone to, if there's a problem, go to Washington, right? Washington will fix it. And you have politicians for a long, long time who felt, well, you know, if I solve this person's problem, right, I can be a hero and go back home and say I solved this person's problem, irrespective of whether the federal government should be involved. One of the great blessings of being out of office, away from it, and seeing from the outside what's going on in Washington, D.C., it gives you a whole new perspective about what Washington should and shouldn't be doing. And I had a good record of limited government, but I have a greater appreciation now, having been outside, as to what the roles of the federal government should be. And while I can give an example, welfare reform was a bill that I was the principal author of, and believed that this was essentially a state function that had been usurped by the federal government. That welfare is not a federal function. Income support to the poor. Nor I would add that Medicaid, health care for the poor, or food stamps, food for the poor, they are not essentially state federal functions. They are functions that are clearly in the purview of the states. And I believe, even I talked about it when we passed welfare reform, that we should take all of these welfare programs, send them back to the states. And we pushed for welfare first because we had a president who had made a promise to end welfare as we know it, Bill Clinton, back in 1992. And so we put forward, in fact, it was my bill, it was in the contract with America to do it. But it was in the constitutional framework, and this is what Jennifer's getting at, of what the state's responsibility is as opposed to the federal responsibility. And we need to get back to that. The Tea Party has done a great job in refocusing the debate of what the roles of the federal, state, local, and both the people should be in our governmental structure. And given, I always say, in a crisis, the old adage, there's opportunity. And the opportunity here is for Americans to rethink what government should do and at what level they should do it. And I think we have an opportunity with this election, and is to make the case to the American public about limiting the role of the federal government to areas that they are indispensable. And I talked about this the other night in the debate when asked about how much I would cut the defense budget. I said none. Defense, when I was born in 1958, you know what percentage of the federal budget was defense? 63% of the budget was spent on defense. You know what percent now? Under 20% is spent on defense. Okay? So you're talking about a cut by over 2/3. It's almost 75% has been cut, as far as relative to the overall size of the government. And so when people say, oh, we got to go out and cut defense, and Ron Paul, oh, we got to cut defense. The bottom line is that is the only thing the federal government has exclusive purview is protecting this country. Almost everything else the federal government does could be done by the states. Not everything, but almost everything. And so the idea that the first thing we should do, or we should put on the table like this crazy commission, is severe custody defense, is an abdication of the central role of the federal government under the Constitution, and more importantly for the president, the central role of the president, which is to be the commander-in-chief and to provide security for this country. So that's how I would look at it. I would look at it in the framework of what the Constitution allows, what is best and most practically a federal role versus a state role.